And we are here with Sam Irvin. He is the master behind a lot of movies that you all know and love. And he is here to answer some questions for us. Thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. And I'm so excited to talk to you.
Yeah, me too. I've always wanted to do something for Splatter Times and for Donald Farmer, and this is fun. So let's get on with it.
Cool. So basically, let's go ahead and dive right in. With your career, you got your start in the late 70s, early 80s, if I'm right, with The Fury. And then you actually worked with Brian De Palma of the
Yes.
Carrie fame. And that was on, which film was that?
Well, I started my career working for Brian De Palma. My first professional gig ever was on his film called The Fury. And that was between my junior and senior year in 1978 in the summer. I went up to work on that film as a production assistant and an extra, and I also got an assignment from Cinefantastique magazine to do a journal on the making of the film. So I was able to have one-on-one interviews with Kirk Douglas and John Cassavetes and everybody involved in the movie. And De Palma, saw that I was a go-getter and I was, rabidly wanting to be a director and rabid fan of De Palma and rabid fan of Hitchcock and everything. And so the following year, I graduated. He had just finished teaching a course at Sarah Lawrence College in New York, and they had written a script based on his treatment for a film called Home Movies. He had me come up and work on that during the summer where they shot it, and it starred Kirk Douglas and Nancy Allen and Keith Gordon. And I thought I was going to be a production assistant again, but he said, no, you're going to be the associate producer and production manager.
Woo!
So first job out of college, he threw me in the deep end to see if I could swim, and apparently I did. So he ended up hiring me full-time after that as his assistant, and I worked on Dress to Kill, and there were other projects that he had in development. Some that didn't get off the ground, like Prince of the City, ended up being directed by Sidney Lumet, but we worked on that project, developing it for a year, and then also development on Blowout. But just about the time that was about to start shooting, Brian decided he wanted me to produce a film, low budget film that one of his proteges was going to direct and write, called The First Time, and De Palma served as a creative consultant and sort of executive producer type. And so then that was my first full-fledged on my own producing gig. And we shot that, and it was released by New Line Cinema, and it had Wendy Jo Sperber and Wallace Shawn and all these great people. And then I went off and did my own short film called Double Negative. It had Bill Finley in it, who played the Phantom of the Paradise in De Palma's Phantom.
Yes.
And he was also the Mad Doctor in Sisters. And it also starred Bill Randolph, who had played the taxi cab driver in Dress to Kill, had Wayne Knight, who was Newman on Seinfeld, and Justin Henry, who was the little boy in Kramer versus Kramer. So this little tiny short film, it was about a horror film director who's making a low-budget horror film called Coat Hanger Massacre. And his sleazy producers, who are Bill Finley and Wayne Knight, decide that they'll make more money if they steal the negative from the lab and collect the insurance. Well, the director gets wind of the plot, and he and his leading lady have to sort of beat them to the crime in order to save their film. And it got chosen for Sundance, for the Sundance Film Festival. It won an award at the Chicago Film Festival, and it ended up, I shot it in 35 because I really wanted it to be shown in theaters. And this is long before digital or anything, so it had to be 35.
The good old days of filmmaking.
The good old days, and so it did. It opened in Los Angeles with Martin Scorsese's After Hours, and in New York it played with Emerald Forest, the John Boorman film, and it got a great review in the New York Times, and that was my sort of showpiece to get my feature film directing career off the ground. And so my first feature film ended up being Guilty as Charged in 1991 with Rod Steiger, Heather Graham, Lauren Hutton, Isaac Hayes, Zelda Rubinstein, and it was sort of this very dark, humorous horror film about a madman who kidnaps murderers who've gotten off and fries them in his own electric chair, in his dungeon,
What
of
could
course.
be better than that?
So that was my first feature. I went to a party that Terry Sweeney, a good friend of mine, Terry Sweeney, who used to be on Saturday Night Live. He was the first openly gay member of the Saturday Night Live cast, and he always did Nancy Reagan in drag.
That's amazing.
And I knew his boyfriend, now husband. We went to school together at the University of South Carolina. Anyway, I knew them during their SNL days, and they had a party in Hollywood, and I went to that, and I saw sitting in the corner Cassandra Peterson, who, as we all know, is Elvira.
Elvira, yes.
And I said, Terry, you've got to introduce me.
As somebody that doesn't get starstruck very often, I'm sure saying Elvira had to be one of those moments, right?
I was starstruck, baby.
Now, Zelda Rubinstein, I'm sorry. You brought her up, and Poltergeist is obviously a classic film, one of my personal favorites. And she was so teeny and so tiny. Was she the nicest lady in the entire world?
Zelda was great, and she ended up doing a couple of films with me. I loved her to death. She was fantastic. She
was great in all of the roles she played. Now, this I just have to ask, because this is another person that I've seen that you have worked with as far as being a producer on a film, but I don't know if you've ever met this person.
Yeah.
Shelley Duvall.
Oh, yes.
Okay. I love Shelley Duvall. Actually, obviously, everybody knows The Shining, but as a little kid growing up in the 80s, I was very familiar with fairy tale theater.
Yes.
Which is
fantastic show.
It still, to this day, really just holds the test of time.
Yeah.
Now, working with Shelley, was she as quirky and cute and fun and amazing as she portrays, and she just comes off?
Yeah. I produced a film called, it had under many titles, Teen Monster, Teen Frankenstein, Big Monster on Campus. I don't even know what it's been called so many things. It's hard to pin it down. Bolt Neck was even another title. But it was basically Ryan Reynolds, when he was a little bit younger in his career. He played a teen Frankenstein monster. And Matthew Lawrence was Dr. Frankenstein, a teen Dr. Frankenstein, and he basically brought him to life in the attic of his suburban home. Now, Matthew Lawrence, or Dr. Frankenstein's parents, were played by Shelley Duvall and Judge Reinhold. And so it was a really cute little film. It actually reminded me a lot of Frankenweenie. I mean, I think it was quite influenced by that. But
she was also in.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I was so excited. Probably of anybody in the cast, I was excited to meet her because I was a huge fan of fairy tale theater. And so she just had incredibly great stories, was incredibly nice. By then she was living in Texas. She was kind of, quasi-retired from acting. And so she just drove herself up to Los Angeles where we're shooting and was happy to do the film, and she really loved the whole concept and everything, and she was just this total doll. I absolutely loved her.
What a legend. What an absolute legend.
She was great.
Back to Elvira, because, I mean, let's be serious.
So I meet Elvira at this party, and I said, I am not worthy, and I loved your film, Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, which had only come out a couple of years earlier, and Terry Sweeney said, well, Sam is a director. He just directed a film called Guilty as Charged. And Cassandra went, oh, I just saw that film. I've been wanting to meet you because if I ever do another Elvira film, I want you to direct it. And I'm like, what?
There is a baby Jesus.
And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? And so, I ended up putting her in a small part, a cameo in a film I did called Acting on Impulse. It was a Scream Queen whodunit with Nancy Allen and all these people, including Zelda Rubinstein, Linda Fiorentino, C. Thomas Howell, Paul Bartel, Mary Warnoff. I mean, just
two of my favorites also, Paul Bartel and Mary Warnoff. Yes.
Incredible cast again. And so Cassandra plays a bouncer at a country western bar, not as Elvira, but a whole new character. And she did this whole kind of Dolly Parton thing. She borrowed a blonde wig from Daryl Hannah and just was hilarious. She improvised stuff of just carding them as they're going into the bar and stuff. So, and then we became friends. Another Elvira film didn't happen for quite a while. And several years later, I get this call from her, and she goes, "Listen, we've been turned down by everybody in town. My husband and I decided we're just going to finance an Elvira film ourselves. I have to be honest with you that we are interviewing several directors, but I always wanted to consider you for it, so we want you to come in for a meeting. So I go there for a meeting. She hands me the script and she goes, this is Elvira's Haunted Hills. It's a spoof of the Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe movies of the 1960s, like Pit and the Pendulum and all that stuff. And she says, are you familiar with those movies? And I go, Cassandra, here is Vincent Price's monologue from the climax of Pit and the Pendulum. Do you know where you are, Bartolome? You are about to enter hell. Hell, the Neverworld, the infernal region, the abode of the damned, a place of torment, Gehenna, Naraka, the pit, and the pendulum, the razor edge of destiny, thus the condition of man bound on an island from which he can never hope to escape, surrounded by the waiting pit of hell, which must destroy him finally. Well, she cocked her head, looked at me like I was absolutely crazy, and said, you're hired. And that's how I got the freaking movie. Now, how did I know that monologue? Okay, back in grade school or junior high school or something, they had like an acting assignment and said to do a monologue. But they wanted it to be, this is school. They wanted it to be Shakespeare or something very academic. And I'm like, what can I don't want to do Shakespeare. Ugh. Maybe, can I do Edgar Allan Poe? And they're like, yes, that sounds fine. So I go home and I back then, before videotape, before anything, I recorded movies off the TV screen with reel-to-reel tapes. Oh. So I had an audio recording of Pit and the Pendulum.
Oh my God.
And I transcribed that monologue. I knew it wasn't technically Edgar Allan Poe. The script was written by Richard Matheson. But I wasn't about to tell them that because that would have raised all sorts of, well, is this academia enough? Or, whatever. And I just went in and did it. This is Edgar Allan Poe, baby.
Hey, it's easier to apologize than ask for permission, right?
Right. So I got an A in that, and I knew it perfectly, and it is stuck in my brain ever since, and that's how I got the job.
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. So, I mean, when you look at the career and see how you've started and then, like, what's come all this time and all of the amazing things that you did, do you have one particular project that really stands out to you? I mean, I'm sure Elvira's Haunted Hills is probably that project.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that just, like, mind-blowing, just so amazing to be there and be the director or the producer or whatever involvement? Because, I mean, you are the master of all trades as far as the entertainment industry goes, so...
As a director, of course, Elvira's Haunted Hills was the most fun I've ever had making a movie. And we literally we shot it in Romania and a few locations in Transylvania, actually. But most of it was sets in a studio outside Bucharest. And we were able to build the sets from the ground up, and design them. I'm like showing the production designer scenes from Pit and the Pendulum and all these great Corman movies and saying, let's do it like this and let's take that. And so it was really so much fun creatively from the ground up, and working with Cassandra and Richard O'Brien from Rocky Horror Picture Show, and just it was just a dream come true.
I mean, that's like full circle in life right there. Yes. And then you actually...
Now, the other film, because I can't just pick one.
Of course.
But that, as far as directing, that was it. As far as producing, I was one of the producers of a little film called Gods and Monsters.
Yes! Oh my God, with Brendan Fraser.
With Brendan Fraser, Sir Ian McKellen,
yes.
Lynn Redgrave.
That won Academy Awards, Golden Globes, if I'm right.
Won Oscar for Best Screenplay. The script, it was based on a book by Christopher Bram. And it was adapted by Bill Condon, who also directed. And Bill won the Oscar for Best Screenplay. It was also up for Best Actor for Ian McKellen and Best Supporting Actress for Lynn Redgrave. Lynn did win the Golden Globe. And it won awards everywhere with critics associations and everything.
Well, that was an amazing movie. It was also revolutionary for its time, too, coming out in the 90s,
It was very revolutionary. It was about, for those who don't know, Ian McKellen played James Whale, the director of Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, The Old Dark House.
All the classics.
And Showboat. There's always a musical queen who says, wait a minute, you forgot to mention Showboat. And I'm like, okay. But at any rate, James Whale is one of my all-time favorite directors. The Bride of Frankenstein is my favorite film of all time. And in Gods and Monsters, we have a flashback scene of James Whale directing a scene on the set of Bride of Frankenstein. And it's the laboratory. And we got to recreate that set from the ground up. And I made sure that it was authentic, baby. And we found some of the original electrical equipment that Kenneth Strickfaden had created for Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, that Mel Brooks had also found for Young Frankenstein, and it appears in that. And so it was quite historic. I mean, literally walking onto that set was hair on the back of my neck time. I mean, it was an absolute dream come true. And for this movie to be, you know, James Whale was a openly gay director. To have such a strong gay lead character in a movie was also something that I took great pride in, because I'm gay myself, obviously, and it just, everything about that movie was special.
It was. That was a great movie. I remember when it came out, and I remember it winning the awards. Everybody was talking about it. So, I mean, my hat tips to you for your involvement in that movie, because that is literally, like, when you look at that, that is a piece of film history right there, Gods and Monsters. It really is. Not that Elvira's Haunted Hills isn't. I mean, they're just two different genres of film, you know? But love Gods and Monsters, love Elvira's Haunted Hills. And you did bring up the name Roger Corman for a second, and I have to ask, was Roger Corman one of the inspirations for you to get into film?
Oh, you know, absolutely. I mean, the films that I loved growing up were Hammer films with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing, who I got to know and meet and interview and everything. They were just idols of mine. All of the Roger Corman movies, absolutely. And Vincent Price was a huge idol for me.
House on Haunted Hill, House of Wax.
Yes, and I got, and some of his later films, the two Dr. Fives movies and Theater of Blood. And I adored him, and I very luckily got to meet him and befriend him as well.